Hello there, it's Juliana Michaels and welcome to my craft room. In this video, I'm sharing the 2026 tour of my craft room and where it's at this point in my creative journey. Not a lot's changed since last year, but I attribute that to having found a nice flow with my current setup and the products I use most. I like to keep the things I use most often closest to me, and yes, my room is usually about this clean. I clean up after every project because I find that having things stored and organized actually helps me be more creative. I've found that clutter clouds my creativity. I also tend to regularly go through my stash and remove items I'm no longer using, never used, or just don't care for anymore, and I find them new homes. As always, the creative journey continues, and I like to move things around here and there, so you'll see some of those small changes throughout the tour if you've ever watched any of my previous craft room tours. All of the storage items and tools that I show in the video will have links in the description box below if they're still available. When you shop through those links, you're supporting me, and I really appreciate that so very much. If you do have questions about certain items, please reach out or leave me a comment so I can get back to you. Now let's get on with the tour. So let's head on in. For my tour this year, I decided to actually start with leaving up some of my recording equipment that I use when I make my videos. So you'll see that there on my desk, and I'll address that here shortly. There's Miss Ziva coming in to say hello, but I'm just going to kind of pan around the room. You can kind of see that things are mostly in the same place as far as like my large furniture. If you've followed along and looked at any of my videos in the past, you'll see that a lot of things are the same, but I do have some new vintage items that I've tucked in and added to my collection and moved things around, and still have a few bare spots that I'd like to fill in on the walls, but maybe someday. So but why don't we start off over here. This is just an IKEA dresser. I've really loved this as a purchase for working because it gives me a counter height surface to work from, and this is where I do most of my die cutting, and I have my larger paper trimmer here, so this just gives me the opportunity to stand up and do some work instead of sitting all the time, which I do like to switch things up. And so I've got my big shot here, and then I've got this bin here that holds my extra cutting plates. And then I just have these self-healing mats here just to protect the surface of the countertop. And we'll just go through some of the drawers. I've moved these around recently, kind of trying a new location for things. So because I've got my die cutting machine up here, I decided to move a lot of my die cutting accessories here. I've got my sidekick in here, some more cutting pads, and like my mint tape and some scissors and things like that that I like to use with my paper cut or die cutting. This next drawer is all of the punches that I own, and used to have a lot more, so this has kind of dwindled down over the years, but I've got those in there. And a lot of these are kind of heavy, like the ones that chomp through lots of thick materials and things like that. So those in there. And then this drawer is kind of my junk drawer. Just has all kinds of random scissors and tools and pens and things that I don't use frequently, but if I need them, I kind of know where they are. And then this drawer here has some extra tools in it, such as my hot glue gun, and this is a, oh goodness, burns holes and things, and like you could use it. It was like for project life stuff where you could like make your own pockets and stuff, but just a little extra heat tool. And I've got some extra craft mats and pencils and pens in there too as well. And then as I go down to the second drawer here, I've got my mink and some of the things that go with it there. I've got sequins and glitter type stuff here, and like shaker card stuff. And then this section here is just all of my alcohol inks. So I've got them in the storage tins that they come in, and then this just little bin here with like the blending solution and other little tools that I use when I'm working with alcohol inks. And then, like I said, these are like my sequins and stuff like that. And then in the next drawer over from that, the next big drawer here, I've got all of my ink refills. So distress inks, oxide inks, archival inks, 49 and Market inks, and then my VersaFine Claire inks. So I kind of have them all in here. And then these are bins from scrapbook.com. And you'll see these bins throughout my room being used for all kinds of different things to store. I just really like them because they're small enough that you can pick them up and move them around, and they can't get too, because they're not too big, they can't get too heavy to where you can't manage them. So I also have my distressed crayons in here, and then some brush markers here. And then going down here to the bottom drawers, this is where I have my extra texture pastes. So these are kind of my backups, or, you know, refills when something empties out. I always like to keep an extra one on hand. And then again, just some other little things that are like extras that were either accidental purchases or just doubles of things that were maybe somewhere else. I've got my extra adhesives in here, extra foam blender tools, just extra, lots of my extra things are in this drawer. And then I also have my distressed paints in here, and then all of my like paint tools and supplies. So I've got a little palette, foam blender tool that I use with paints, and then brushes. And then in this drawer here, I have all of my spray stains. So I've got them separated out from the distress and the distress spray stains and the distress oxide sprays. And again, they're in the scrapbook.com bins. And I've got the new Tim Holtz Ranger labels on them. And what I really like about these is that they are waterproof, they're removable, and I think they pretty much match. The colors pretty close. I don't know if they're exactly perfect, but they're close enough for me to know, like, hey, this is the color I want. And if I really need to know something true color, I can always go to my swatch book. So, and then in here, I've just got extra refills of my sprays, the ones that are close to being empty, or just the ones that I use a lot. So I keep those in there. And then I've just got some extra rubbing alcohol and gloves and some paint in here, just a few little random things that fit in the corner there to fill up the desk, or fill up the drawer. And next, let's just go to my desk here. I'm gonna just kind of pan around here. So I got these lights that I use for my lighting, and but I also have a pretty decent overhead lighting other than a ceiling fan that I have to kind of contend with the light from that. But my husband was able to put some big lights in the ceiling that I use to give me more light as well. And then this here, this stand, this is what I put my iPhone on, because that's what I use when I record my videos. And this is just a camera tripod, and then I've got an extension arm on it with some weights to balance it. So, and then I just can swing that over my desk and record my videos for you guys when I'm doing projects. So let's see, this little stand here, come around. So this little stand here I just use to hold my iPhone. This is a mug warmer that I really love having, and you might notice my little setup with my craft mats here. I've got one of the small Tim Holtz mats here off to the side. I like to use this just to protect my surface, but then I can put hot stuff or cold stuff or wet stuff or things to dry off to the side there. And so here you can see my glassboard studio mat. When I'm not recording videos, this is the mat that I prefer to work on when I'm just creating and working on my concepts and ideas, or just creating for myself. I do like the surface because it is super durable, being glass, and I do like the magnetic feature. So I really like the grid pattern on it. It's a little bit easier for me to use, like trying to line things up and center things and that sort of thing. So like I said, I'm really enjoying using it. And then I have this little bin here. This is long retired. This is jelly bean soup tote bin that used to be available at Joann's several years ago. But I just use that to kind of hold some of my art journals and notebooks. And then if I've got some new to me products that I've ordered and haven't had a chance to play with, I kind of try to keep them in there to remind me to pull them out and do something with them. So next up, why don't we look at my IKEA cart here. And I keep this right next to my desk, as you can see, and I've got my heat tools in there. This little tool holder here is from scrapbook.com, and it's got these metal cups in it, so you can put your heat tools in there if they're still hot and they're not going to melt anything. And I've got my scissors and other little tools in here, and then I've got this little divider that I got on Amazon just to hold some other little tools and things, and then another bin here that I've got like my stamp clean platform and other, my score tool and grip made and other different kinds of kind of flat tools. My gel plates are in here. So just kind of keep all that stuff together. And then on the second shelf here, I've got my stamping blocks and then the adhesives that I use that aren't liquid. So got my foam squares and tape rolls and foam rolls and all that in there, and just some extra pens and brushes here, some cleaning supplies there. And then on the bottom I have my smaller paper trimmer, and then I keep some of these extra lids from the scrapbook.com bins down here, and I use those as trays. And then this is also just some extra foam blending brushes that I have there for some reason. Yeah, and then I've just got hanging on the side here, I've got my Swiffer duster to clean things up and my brayers. So these little hooks to help hold those in place. And so, yeah, let's move on to the next thing here. All right, so now I'm just gonna go to this unit here onto this side. I had to move my cart out of the way there. So I've got my, up here on top, we'll start with, I'd love to find something to put over here, but I've yet to figure out what that's gonna be. So one of these days, but I've got my pin board up here with my distress pin collection, and then just some fun little things I've collected. My swimming trophies from back in the day, and then that's below that, these are the Stampin' ink storage units, and these are my archival inks over here, and then just kind of these ones here are just combinations of different individual inks like VersaFine Clair and alcohol lift ink, and I just kind of have those together, my Memento ink. And then these here are the VersaFine Clair inks, and then these are the 49 and Market ink pads, and then I have my large archival ink pads here. So yeah, and those units, I love them. They're super sturdy, made out of wood, and they also have them in white, and they can be, you know, sitting like I have them here, or you can hang them on the wall. So there's definitely different options depending on what your situation might be, if that's something you were looking into. They have them in different sizes, and they also have them where they'll fit inside the IKEA Kallax units as well. But that's what this is. The base of this here is just the Kallax unit, and I just have it on its, I don't know, technically on its side, but I have it up the long way so it's not sitting upright. And then I just have all the little cubbies filled with things. So this kind of bin here, you'll see several of those throughout. Those are from Target. I'm not sure if they're even still available anymore, but they were like in the kids section, probably meant for holding like toys. And I just like the look of them. They're sturdy enough and not too expensive, so they have worked for their purpose for me. But This one here, I've got like all of my, I kind of call it like my fabrics drawer, and even though I don't have a lot of fabric, but I've got my felt and some canvas and ribbon, twine, embroidery thread, that kind of stuff is in here. So kind of keeps all of that sort of themed thing together. And then in this is a scrapbook.com storage unit that has multiple compartments that are divided. And I just use those to hold, kind of keep organized, like what I'm going to be working on next for scrapbook.com. So right now I've got kind of my Valentine's spring stuff in there for the most part. I mean, it just kind of helps keep that organized. And then here, and then these next few bins, you notice these green metal bins. These are old vintage hardware bins, and they're heavy. They're very heavy, but they're heavy duty, and I really like them for holding my dies because I know that it's not going to break under all the weight. So this has my collection of scrapbook.com dies, and some of them are, you know, in magnet, like on magnet sheets in little plastic folders, and then some of them are in the original packaging still. And then some of them, I have them on these magnet sheets to store them. So I kind of keep them on the sheets. If there's something that I use really frequently and they're not too tiny where I'm worried about losing pieces, I'll use those magnet cards. If it's something like where there's little small ones, like, you know, something like this where I'm afraid I might lose something, then I put them in an envelope. So there's those. And then next to that, this is just one of the scrapbook.coms. Actually, they have these ink pad holders, but they're the perfect size to hold their little A2 paper pads. So I have a couple of those here, and then one down here where I have my paper pads from them stored. And then down here I have all of my scrapbook.com stamp sets. And then if they've got coordinating dies, then I have those with them. And I have kind of gone to with a lot of these stamp sets, taking the stamp set and then just trimming off the top edge right underneath that seam to create a pocket. And then I can just slide the stamp in and out of that pocket easier. Kind of hard to do here with one hand. But then I can just use that instead of having to buy, you know, envelopes, because I felt like I was just going through envelopes and stuff so quickly. So I've kind of switched to keeping my stamp sets in the original packaging. Next bin here, I've got my stencil stuff, I guess I'd call it. These binders have my scrapbook.com stencils. Those stencils are a little, like, they're a little larger, and so they fit perfectly in these 6x8 albums and in 6x8 page protectors. And then this is another storage unit from scrapbook.com that's like a tiered storage unit, and it has been working perfectly for me to store my Tim Holtz stencils in because they fit in there perfectly. So there's little inserts that come with this that I just pulled out, and yeah, and then I just use that for my stencils. And then next I have my random collection of stencil brushes, and I am still struggling with how to store these. So these are the Ulta new ones and the Simon Hurley ones, and I just kind of have them together, but in these little random storage pieces to keep them somewhat organized. So if you have any suggestions about that, feel free to share. I would love to know what people are doing to store some of these. All right. And then next here, I've got another one of those hardware bins, and this one is just packed with all of my stamps that are not scrapbook.com and are not Tim Holtz. So scrapbook.com and Tim Holtz are probably the largest, like, brands there that I have in my craft room, but I do also really love other things as well. So I just kind of keep most of those here in this bin, and they're not like organized in any certain way. They're just kind of in there, and I just kind of flip through and find what I might be looking for if I'm going to be doing something with those. And then here I've got just some art journals, and then some crafty cleanup cloths, and then here I keep my splat box and paper towels. And reason being is this is like right behind my desk, so it's super easy access for me to get that anytime I want to work with my sprays. And then finally, this one here, I've got another one of these storage units, and this one I've got some of the small clean stamps from Tim Holtz, but then I also have the sets that are the mixed media sets that have this stamp set and the stencil all in there together. And again, like, this is just a great way to organize them because they just fit in this little unit perfectly. And then here's some more of my blending brushes. And then this is a vintage stamp holder. So back in the day, this little handle type thing was actually on like a stamp, and that was on the bottom of it here. But now I've got my foam blending tools on here, and then this little rotating thing here is from Make It by Marco, I think, or Made by Marco. And so I've got my other blending brushes on that. Now let's go to the next unit. So this middle unit, I'll just kind of back up a little bit. This is another IKEA unit, and it's just, I think, the Billy bookcase. And here on the bottom, I have these wooden bins, and these are long unavailable from Hobby Lobby. I've had them for many years, and I've used them for different types of storage, but most recently, over the last few years, this is where I've been storing my Sizzix dies from Tim Holtz, and also my embossing folders. So, you know, I'll be honest, as new ones come out, I do tend to go through my stuff pretty regularly, and things find a new home that I don't use often. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I've been able to kind of stay in these bins and not need more to hold them, because of my purging that I like to do. So yeah, so unfortunately, like I said, these are no longer available, but you know, there's lots of things out there that are similar. You just, you know, if you know what your measurements are, just have to kind of look and find something that's going to fit what you're wanting to store. These little labels are from scrapbook.com, the white part is, and then I used a Dymo label maker to add the various labels on there, and I just divided them to do what works for me. So, you know, I've got butterflies and birds and botanicals and, you know, alphanumeric and gentleman and wood grain and things that like made sense to me for when I was looking for things. I also have a whole bin that's all Halloween and one that's all Christmas. And again, you know, I go through these pretty regularly and find homes for the things that I'm just not using anymore sometimes. But I'll show you kind of where I also put my extra stuff that I don't use much either. So next up here is my stamp collection from Tim Holtz. And this used to hold all of them, and now I've had to grow a little bit, which I've always kind of tried to minimize adding extra storage, and I just try to stay in my space and don't let myself get overwhelmed by too many products, because for me that really kind of shuts me down. But I've had to expand it a little bit because I do love his stamps and the design so much and use them quite a bit. So I've given myself some freedom to grow my collection and where I'm storing them. But these are just the bins here are from scrapbook.com, and I've just added some pattern paper to the front of them to just make them a little more coordinated with my craft room. And then again, I've got these same dividers in there that I've added the labels to, and then just have the stamps in the whatever section they go to. And next up here, I have a stadium organizer. I believe this is from Tiffany, and this has my distressed mica stains and my spritzes on there. And this is kind of new. I used to have something else up here. I think it was my Popsicolor, and those have since found a new home, and I've put these up here to kind of remind me to use them a little bit more. And then just from there, I've got just shelves with some kind of just fun personal things here that I've collected or made. And then next we'll go over here to my other calyx unit. So I have another calyx unit on this side laying down. And again, like that top surface gives me kind of a little bit of a counter area to put more things on if I need to. And then on top here, I've got some additions to my collection of antique stuff. And above that, I've got more of the Stampin' Storage ink pad units. These are the ink pad units that are made to hold the distress ink pads. So I have my regular distress inks and then my oxide inks here. And those, as you can see, have labels on them. And those are the new labels from Tim Holtz and Ranger that I have on the spray stains and also on the paints that you've seen. And again, I just like that they're waterproof and removable if need be, and I'm not going to have to worry about them getting damaged when I'm like got inky or wet hands. Like that part I really, really like. Next below here, these are new to me. These are coming soon from scrapbook.com, and these are their new tilt bins, and they've got 3 different sizes. These are the smaller ones, and then these are the next size up, and then there's got one more that's a large one that's just one tilt bin, and they all, if they're the same size, they like stack and connect to each other, so that part's kind of cool. And you know, they just open up like you would expect with the tilt bin, and you can get in there and put whatever you want. So I'm using them right now. This one here and this one, this is 2 units here of the smaller ones, and I'm using them to hold some of my Tim Holtz everyday ideology stuff with the hope that maybe it will inspire me to use it a little more, because quite honestly, I have quite the collection of those things, and I don't use it like I should. So it's, you know, hopefully if I can see it, maybe I'll start using it a little bit more. So that's the plan. And down here in my unit, this is more of my Tim Holtz collection. And then I also have some of the coordinating die sets that are available at Simon Says Stamp that go with Tim's dies. And I don't have them stored with the stamp, and that's just kind of my own personal preference. But the envelopes that I have these in right now don't fit laying down this way in these units. So I just have them back here, and I just kind of try to remember which die sets or which stamp sets have dies. I just try to remember that, you know, so. This here, this is my swatch binder, and I've shared that here and there over the years. So that's just got my swatches for all of my different inks in it. Down here I've got some drawers. This one has my embossing glazes in it from Tim Holtz. And then I have this little tin here that I use to store all of my embossing tools. So I've got my embossing ink pads and my anti-static tools and embossing pens and things like that in there. And then below that, I have a drawer here with all of my other embossing powders. So I've just kind of have them separated here a little bit. These are the Wow embossing powders, and then these are the Ranger embossing powders that I have, although I do have a couple of other ones, sparkly ones in here and mixed up, and then the ultra thick here. But these little dividers that I'm have in this drawer are from Stampin' Storage. It just kind of helps keep them separated a little bit and from sliding around so much when I open and close it. And then, yeah, we'll just go ahead and do these drawers here. So this drawer, I've got my mini distress inks in, mini archival inks, and some other like random things, little pastes and some foundry wax, things that just needed something to kind of fill in the sides of the drawer with, so that they just kind of found a home in there. And then this drawer has my pastes in it that I'm using and some other cleaning. These are like my stamp cleaners and refresher sprays and things like that. And then my Sizzix wax there. And now we're going to get into some of my Tim Holtz, more of my Tim Holtz collection, I guess. So these little bins, these are from Joanne, again, long time ago, but they're little planter boxes, and I have several of them here, and I just have my ideology papers and ephemera and things in there. And this one here, I've got my papers from Tim Holtz, so like his wood grain papers or Yupo papers. And then I've got the cardstock back here, and I've got some more cardstock here and some of the pattern paper pads from him there. And then in these bins, I've got them kind of separated out. This is my Christmas ideology, and I have all of like the small stuff in these stack and sort. No, not stack and sort. Can't think of what they're called. I'll have everything that like you see here. I'm gonna have it linked in the description box below. So, you know, if you've got questions about it, please feel free to ask me, and I'll get back to you and let you know for sure what it is. But this is from scrapbook.com, and it's got 4 tiers, and 2 of them have like little inserts that you can pull out and put things in. But anyway, I found that super helpful for kind of organizing a lot of my ideology stuff. But then I've got, you know, the other bigger things are in there with it too, but that's all my Christmas. And then I have another bin that have similar, that has all my Halloween. And then this bin up here has more of my everyday collection, and then just some other craft things that I use, like Spanish moss and that kind of stuff that I wanted to kind of keep together when I do some ideology projects. And then lastly is my craft closet. And this mostly has paper storage in it, but up here on the top shelf, I just have my collection of ideology, Halloween, and Christmas projects that I've made. And so I just keep them all up there. And these doors are usually open, so I can see those a lot. So I try to make this look pretty too. And here again, just some more storage units. These little drawer things are no longer available, but those were from scrapbook.com. But they're just kind of filled with miscellaneous little things. And here on this shelf here, I've got my papers that I use the most of. So over here in these magazine holders, I have my colored cardstock from various companies, mostly Sizzix, and I also use these like 8.5 by 11 folders to hold, like, I've got one here that's just for vellum and you know, just various specialty papers there. And then these drawers are the papers that I use the most of. So I have those labeled with the Dymo label maker. So most of these are my Ranger brand papers that I use. So the craft stock and the black mixed media paper. And then these are the mixed media papers from scrapbook.com. So I have those ink or paper pads there. And this is like the Tim Holtz wood grain mixed media paper, my beloved distress watercolor cardstock. And then I've got just some generic craft cardstock here, and some Nina paper and HP LaserJet paper, which is something that I like to use every now and then for things. And then these bins are my scrap paper bins. And so I've got a drawer here for my Tim Holtz scraps, Sizzix scraps and scrapbook.com scraps. And there's some more mini albums I've made, junk journals. Again, more drawers, and these are just, some of them are kind of junk drawers, but I've got Sizzix products in here and tools that I use when I'm working on projects specifically for them. Just helps me keep them all together. Extra printer paper, chipboard. This one has a project in it that has been like sitting around in my room for way too long and I've never done anything with it. These, again, you see more of the scrapbook.com bins. So I've got here one with just like extra backgrounds. This one has all kinds of extra ephemera pieces and embellishments and things like that that I've made that didn't make it onto the card. But I like to use, as you see here, I've got extras. I like to use these to keep projects together. So like this bin here has all of my products and supplies and stuff in it for the next class that I'm going to be teaching in February called Stretch Your Stamps. So you can keep a lookout for that. And then kind of in the corner here, because of the door, I try to put some of the tools and things like that that I don't use or that are extras or whatever. So like I've got my cinch machine here, Xyron adhesive, extra stamping tool, extra die cutting machine and heat tool. And then down here, as I was saying, I've given myself permission to expand. So I have those same stamp units that I showed over there on my shelf earlier. These are my Halloween and Christmas collections. And then there in the back, those are some of my extra stamps and dies that I have found that I'm not really using or have never used. And so I kind of have them sitting back there trying to figure out what I'm going to do with them, but one of these days. And then here, these are some bins from scrapbook.com. This one's from Art Bin, so they're really similar. These are just a tiny bit wider, and I took the lids off. These actually have lids on them, and they've got little dividers. And I love them for storing things if you need to put something in upright. So I've got, some of my Sizzix stamps and embossing folders and dies in here. And then these are just various storage sleeves, extra magnet sheets, blank cards and envelopes, things like that. And then, extra. I also have my extra cutting pads in there. So just kind of starts getting a little more random in here. And this drawer unit just has like extra plastic bags and things, just random things in there in this drawer over here. So trying to think what else here. These bins down at the bottom, this has just got extra storage pieces in it. And then these bins down here, I've got a bin with my art journal stuff in it that I need to love on a little more than I do. This has got more ideology. So these are like all of the ideology tags and baseboards and things like that are kind of like the bases for those kind of projects if I'm going to work on them. This bin's got extra adhesives in it. And then lastly, this one just has some more extra craft things that are kind of more basic craft stuff that I just don't use very often. So I kind of have it tucked back here because it's a little harder to get to. So yeah, so that is a look at my room and where it is here in 2026. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Until next time, stay crafty, my friend.